Good evening, you're watching London Live News at 6 with Alicia Edwards. Coming up tonight, the PM faces MPs over his Partygate fine, insisting he did not knowingly break his own lockdown laws. How police plan to enforce laws around intrusive staring on the underground, as officers say a poster campaign has led to an increase in reports from passengers. We'll have an update on London's weather in the next 10 minutes. Plus, the older generation have become digitally literate after being pushed online during the pandemic. We'll have more and the risks to look out for. And although the festive season feels like a distant memory, panto dames and villains from across the capital and beyond are gathering in the West End this evening for the Panto Awards. All of that on the way before 7, but first tonight, the Prime Minister has apologised to MPs for breaking lockdown rules almost a week after being handed a police fine for a Downing Street party in 2020. Boris Johnson reiterated his position that he did not knowingly break the law at an event to celebrate his birthday.
As soon as I received the notice, I acknowledged the hurt and the anger. And I said that people had a right to expect better of their Prime Minister. And I repeat that, Mr. Speaker, again in the House now. Let me also say, not by way of mitigation or excuse, but purely because it explains my previous words in this House, that it did not occur to me then or subsequently that a gathering in the Cabinet room just before a vital meeting on COVID strategy could amount to a breach of the rules.
Well, opposition parties have repeatedly accused the PM of lying to Parliament over the matter. The Speaker of the Commons, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, today gave permission for MPs to vote on Thursday on whether to launch an investigation into claims Boris Johnson misled Parliament. The boxer Amir Khan says he was involved in an armed robbery in East London last night. Scotland Yard confirmed it was investigating reports that Mr Khan had a watch worth more than £70,000 stolen by two men, one of whom pointed a gun at the former world champion and his wife, Farial Makdoum. It happened on Leighton High Road at around 9:15 last night. Farial later posted pictures of the watch that was taken, a diamond-encrusted Frank Muller. Khan said both he and his wife were safe and unharmed. A 29-year-old man has appeared in court after being charged following an incident on Horse Guards Parade yesterday morning. Prashanth Kande from Thamesmead is accused of attempted grievous bodily harm and possession of a knife after allegedly confronting two police officers. He indicated a guilty plea for the possession charge and indicated a not guilty plea for GBH at Westminster Magistrates Court. He was remanded in custody to appear at Southwark Crown Court next month. A second teenager has been charged with the murder of Tayon Campbell-Pitter. The 16-year-old was stabbed in Angus Street in Lewisham last Wednesday. The Met says a 15-year-old boy was held yesterday and charged this morning. A second 15-year-old was charged yesterday and was remanded in custody to appear at the Old Bailey later this week. Now, a campaign to make people aware of inappropriate behaviour on the underground has led to an increase in people being reported for staring. Speaking to The Telegraph, the British Transport Police said it was receiving complaints about passengers who had been caught looking at others in an intrusive and sexual way. The poster campaign aims to highlight ways in which sexual harassment can take place on public transport. Hebe Campbell has more on the campaign and how police plan to enforce the law.
People travelling on the London Underground are now reporting daily for people staring after a new campaign to crack down on inappropriate behaviour of people on the tube was launched last month. The campaign by Transport for London also aims to tackle behaviour such as skirting and catcalling on public transport around the capital. I reached out to British Transport Police about how they plan on mandating this kind of behaviour. For example, if you are stared at on the tube and it does make you feel uncomfortable, how you go about reporting that. They said that they are dedicated to tackling any behaviour that makes a person feel uncomfortable. A British Transport Police spokesperson also added that tackling sexual harassment and sexual offences is their top priority, and they have specialist patrols across the network day and night to catch offenders and reassure passengers as they travel. So how do you go about reporting behaviours like this and make you feel uncomfortable on public transport around the capital? Well, British Transport Police told me that anyone who's experienced this behaviour should report any form of sexual harassment to British Transport Police by texting them on 61016, whether something's happened to you at the time or whether it's happened to you recently. Each report they receive provides them with valuable information that can be used to build a picture of an offender.
There we are, Hebe Campbell there on that campaign. Some other stories from the capital today. There's a warning that as many as 4 in 10 people in the UK could fall into fuel poverty by October unless the government does more to support vulnerable households. The statistic came from energy bosses as they face questions from MPs over the current crisis. A cap on gas and electricity bills is expected to rise again in the autumn, having rocketed at the start of this month.
The price increase we've seen on 1st of April was unprecedented. Never seen anything like it in my 30 years in the industry. So we are expecting a severe impact on customers' ability to pay. There is no doubt that the government's intervention, the £200 that will be paid in October and the rebate on council tax will help, but it isn't nearly enough to mitigate the full impact of this price increase. So what we expect to see is firstly, a significantly larger number of people moving into fuel poverty as a consequence of the price increase, and indeed potentially further increases in October, and a consequent significant increase in bad debt. And if nothing is done further by the government to mitigate this impact, we expect to see the outstanding debt increase by around 50% on our books. That's what our modelling shows us by the end of this year.
The Olympic cycling champion Sir Bradley Wiggins, who grew up in northwest London, has revealed he was groomed by a coach when he was a boy. The 41-year-old said it happened when he was around the age of 13 and that it had impacted him as an adult. He spoke about the abuse during an interview with Men's Health UK. He did not name his abuser, but said that he had been groomed sexually. A lorry carrying vegetable oil caused major problems on part of the M25 today. The vehicle was reported to have hit the central reservation before overturning, spilling its contents across the road. It happened between junction 23 at Hatfield and junction 25 at Enfield. That section of the motorway was closed clockwise for a large part of the day and led to long queues. Now, the London Aquatic Centre on the Olympic Park reopened today, a month after a chemical incident led to its evacuation. Dozens of people needed medical treatment on the 23rd of March after a large amount of chlorine gas was released. Investigations have been carried out and a chemical reaction was blamed. The centre posted on social media to thank swimmers for their patience while the venue was closed. And marking St George's Day on Saturday, celebrations will return to Trafalgar Square with live music and entertainment. Alongside the main stage, there will be appearances from St George and his dragon, stilt walkers, and of course the Pearly Kings and Queens. It will be the first time that the celebrations have taken place on Trafalgar Square since 2019. Let's take a look at the weather now. There's some clouds sticking around this evening, but it should be dry. Overnight lows around 8 or 9 degrees. Tomorrow it looks like it's going to be a fine and bright day. Some sunny spells and highs of 17 degrees Celsius. A similar outlook for Thursday and Friday at this stage. Now, just before the break, as part of our coverage of the war in Ukraine, the Evening Standard's Charlene Boumansour travelled to Poland to meet some of those who've fled the conflict.
Natalia, who is 24, travelled from Vilnius, southeast of Ukraine, to Lviv in order to cross into Poland with her younger sister Margarita and her 2 children, Anya and Ola.
Дуже були всі схвильовані. Це було дуже великим стресом для мене, щоб взяти дітей та поїхати звідти. Ми коли їхали, ми думали, що нам тут буде легше. Але це не так. Нам дуже важко, коли ми розуміємо, що наші рідні залишилися там. Ми за них дуже сильно хвилюємося. Нам дуже за них страшно. Ми віримо і сподіваємося, що це все дуже швидко закінчиться і ми повернемося додому.
Well, you can see Charlene's full film on the World section of the Evening Standard's website. You're watching London Live News. Still to come. Just how bad for the environment is your holiday? Details of the new tool that promises to reveal the true extent of our carbon footprint when planning trips.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Hey there, welcome back. Let's take a look at some other news headlines today. Civil servants are being told to return to their offices as some senior Conservatives say it is unacceptable to be working from home. The Cabinet Office Minister Jacob Rees-Mogg has written to department bosses urging them to send a clear message to their teams, saying it was important that central London buildings were at full capacity. Figures show daily attendance sat at around 44% at the start of this month. Some civil service leaders say being forced into London is counterproductive. Well, it comes as research suggests people who would normally have commuted into the capital have begun using more co-working spaces in towns where they live. Figures from the office space provider IWG show an uptake last month in spaces in places like Hemel Hempstead, Maidenhead and Aylesbury. It suggests the era of long daily commutes is over. And that ties in with this final story. In what's being dubbed the Great British Rail Sale, train tickets are set to be slashed by as much as half as the government attempts to ease the cost of living pressures with cheaper travel in the coming weeks. The Transport Secretary said more than 1 million train tickets would be reduced this spring. The sale is expected to see some London to Edinburgh services, for example, brought down from £44 to £22. The discounted tickets will go on sale today and are for off-peak fares between the 25th of April and the 27th of May. Now, 1 in 5 people over the age of 65 say they feel more confident using the internet since the start of the pandemic. That's according to the Avast Digital Citizenship Report, which looked into digital literacy and found just 7% said they still find it hard to use the web. Well, here to tell us more about the findings is digital literacy expert David Schreier. David, thank you so much for joining us today. So, first of all, more people are seeming to be connected. Were you surprised by the stats compared to what you saw before the pandemic?
Well, thank you, Alicia, for having me on the show. So this pandemic produced something that was a little startling because we had a lot of people who were on the internet who adopted digital technology, but there were still holdouts. There were still people who were resisting digital technology. They wouldn't make online payments. They wouldn't talk to people over video chat. They insisted on using paper money even. And so one of the unexpected benefits of the COVID-19 pandemic was that the laggards, the people who were resisting taking on digital technology, finally made the plunge. And so, yes, a lot more people became digital citizens as a result of the pandemic.
Yeah, I saw it myself. My own grandma became fully connected, messaging me on her iPad, and it was great. We were all connected in a way that we weren't before. It's amazing. Do you find that the way that people are actually using the web has changed through the pandemic?
I think people are a lot more comfortable using the internet now that they've kind of had this prolonged period of time where they've gotten accustomed to the tools and accustomed to the vernacular, accustomed to the environment of having a video conversation instead of a face-to-face conversation, relying more heavily on messaging apps instead of going down to the pub and talking to someone in person. And so there has been a bit of a shift, which has really been interesting to see. I run a company, Esme Learning, that is entirely virtual. So we got venture funded in March of 2020. So we now have about 170 people in 9 countries, and we've never had an office. And I think this is actually the future of what work is going to look like.
Do you think the type of tech that's now available has meant that it's more accessible to people over the age of 65 compared to maybe 10 or 15 years ago when things were a bit more clunky, perhaps?
I think absolutely it's become easier to connect with people. So I've been playing around with digital technology since I was about 6 years old. So for me, I am as close to a digital native as you can get in my generation. But a lot of people are digital immigrants. Right? They are coming to digital citizenship from a position of being used to a completely different way of talking to people and communicating with people. And it's taken a while, but we finally have gotten the technology out of the hands of the engineers and put it into the hands of the designers. And as you see more design thinking paying attention to user experience, you start to see things get easier to use. digital apps become much more intuitive. It's a lot easier to get up and running in a few minutes instead of taking an hour of training to figure out how to connect a video call.
With increased use of the internet comes also the increased risks. There are people out there, scammers, trying to get those people on the internet who aren't aware of, aren't as digitally literate. Have you seen an increase in the number of people falling for those kind of scams online in the last few years?
Yeah, no, absolutely. This has been one of the kind of the dark clouds of having more people come on the internet, particularly people, who are getting connected digitally, who were the holdouts, who maybe didn't have the same fluency in digital technology that someone who was kind of born to it had. And so we have seen scam rates increase dramatically by multiples, by several 100%. We have seen a lot of victimization of people through identity theft. And so as a result, we have seen highlighted the importance, and this is something that's talked about in the Avast Digital Citizenship Report, the importance of better awareness of privacy and of security in the digital era.
There we are, digital literacy expert David Schreier there. Now, with 70% of us in the UK thinking it should be mandatory for industries to label their environmental impact, travel company Explore Worldwide has launched a new carbon rating system. It's a first on this scale for the industry, and it will identify and break down the average carbon footprint per person of their chosen trip. Well, Henry has been hearing more.
We're in the middle of a climate emergency, and as a holiday operator that sends thousands of people overseas, we wanted to really understand the carbon impact of our trips. So we've taken a measurement of all 500 plus of our trips, so that we can give every trip a carbon score based on every aspect of the trip, from the hotels that you stay in, the transport that you take, the food that you eat, etc. And we've done this for two reasons. One is really to understand the impact that we've had so that we can mitigate, not so that people don't travel. We always want people to travel. It's one of the great things in life. But we feel that we do have a responsibility in the middle of a climate emergency to reduce that impact. And the best way to reduce that is to firstly understand that impact so that we can take steps. The second one, I think, is to really give customers transparency around the impact of trips. Again, not so that they don't travel, but so that they can understand and make better choices about how often, where, the style of travel that they do. And I think those two things together will help us mitigate and play our part in reducing the carbon imprint of travel generally.
So you've announced this in line with the move to put calories on menus, but this, what you're doing with your company Explore, this is the first on this scale for the travel industry, is that correct?
It is, absolutely. As I say, with over 500 trips in all 7 continents, it's been a huge undertaking. We believe it's the biggest of its kind, and we hope it's something that becomes an industry standard. We feel we have a responsibility. As I said, we take thousands of people around the world. That does have an impact. It also has a really positive impact on the communities that we travel through, in terms of helping the economy, jobs, local jobs, etc. So we don't want to stop traveling. We just want to do it in a more light touch way. And the first step to doing that was understanding the impact, and then so that we can mitigate.
So how will the system work? How's it all calculated then?
Yeah, it's been a huge undertaking, over 10,000 sets of data. We've spoken to more than 2,000 accommodation providers, over 400 hours of people hours to bring the data together. We've worked with a company called eCollective so that the data is rigorous. It's hugely complex. I won't bore you with the science unless you'd like me to. But what we've ended up with is a pretty accurate carbon measurement score of every single trip. So much in the same way that you might see the calorie count on a packet of crisps, you'll now see a carbon measurement score for every single one of our trips.
So can you give me some examples then about some trips that won't have much an effect, but some that maybe will have a massive effect?
Sure. Look, and every trip is very different. So if you go to Japan, for example, and you spend a week in Japan and you take bullet trains, fantastic bullet train experience all around the country, you're obviously traveling a long way, so the carbon impact is going to be higher. If you go on a walking holiday in Tuscany with 10 other people, the carbon impact is going to be much lower. And we're not saying do one of those and not the other. We're just saying, you might do your Japan higher carbon impact trip once every 5 years, and you might do those walking holidays, whether they're in Tuscany or closer to home, a bit more frequently. It's just about having the same way with food and the calories. and you have a balanced diet, we think of having a balanced approach to travel. And I think this labelling will help people do that.
Do you think if more businesses did this, it would create more pressure on major companies throughout the world to start putting even more time and money into reducing their carbon footprint?
Look, absolutely. For us, this was a huge undertaking, quite high cost in terms of the actual physical cost and the amount of resource we had to throw at it. But we feel a responsibility to play our part. We'd like this to become an industry standard. And that will do two things. It will give people much more transparency and they'll understand the impact that they're having. Again, not so that they don't travel, they just travel in a more informed way. And secondly, the industry can then start to mitigate and play its part in what undoubtedly is, the science proves it, is a climate emergency.
As it's the first of its kind in the travel industry, or the biggest that you mentioned, it may have the desired effects, giving people the information, thinking about their own carbon footprint, but you may get less customers. Are you prepared or worried about that?
Look, of course there's a risk, but we feel the transparency and our responsibility to mitigate is more important than that. I think hopefully your customers will see us as a company that's taking the responsibility, understanding the impact that we have, but then choosing to travel with us because we're prepared to put in, that effort and transparency around it. Yes, I want to grow our business, but I want to do it in a way that has the least impact. And hopefully customers will see that and come to us in the same and hopefully increasing numbers in the future.
And the travel industry, has a huge effect on the environment. How quickly do you think that it can reach carbon neutral or at least massively reduce it to a better, safer level?
Look, I think it can take lots of steps now. That this study shows that we can now work with our operators and suppliers and to identify things pretty quickly that brings down that carbon footprint. We've been carbon offsetting flights for a long time now, and I think it's taking those simple steps. We have a target of reducing the carbon impact of our trips by 50% by 2030. 50% is a huge number, but again, this kind of exercise allows us to identify those things pretty quickly. So the travel industry is very good at adapting, and of course, the travel industry won't exist if it doesn't adapt to the reality we're in now. So hopefully something like the study we've done will compel others to do something similar. And hopefully it'll give customers that confidence about how, when and why they travel in the future.
There we go, Henry there speaking to Explore Worldwide's director, Michael Edwards. Right, you're watching London Live News with Alicia Edwards. A reminder of our top story coming up after the break. Plus, Panto at Easter. It seems a long way from the festive tradition, but the Panto Awards are taking place in the capital tonight. More to come.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather. And know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Hello there, welcome back. A reminder of our main story this evening. The Prime Minister has apologised to MPs for breaking lockdown rules almost a week after being handed a police fine for a Downing Street party in 2020. Boris Johnson reiterated his position that he did not knowingly break the law at an event to celebrate his birthday.
Let me also say, not by way of mitigation or excuse, but purely because it explains my previous words in this House, that it did not occur to me then or subsequently that a gathering in the Cabinet room just before a vital meeting on COVID strategy could amount to a breach of the rules.
Now, panto dames and villains are being recognised in an all-star ceremony in the capital this evening. The first ever Panto Awards are taking place at the Trafalgar Theatre in the West End, hosted by none other than Christopher Biggins. Well, a little earlier, children's TV presenter and no stranger to the world of panto, Chris Jarvis, told me more.
Panto, as you know, has been going on for a very long time and it's developed over the years. And I think with every town, village, church hall, palladium, all putting on pantos, it seems, every Christmas, it seemed only right that there should be an association that brings everyone together to talk about it and to try and embrace what it's all about and help each other. And that's really what the Pantomime Association is about. And the awards is I mean, it's obviously rewarding people who are very progressive and it's rewarding excellence, but it's also just really about having fun and saluting some of the unsung heroes.
Yeah, so what are some of the categories that we can expect this evening? There's a wide range, aren't there, of opportunities to take home an award.
That's right. I mean, we have Best Newcomer Award. I can't remember all that. Somebody I work with, actually, Georgia Grant Anderson is up for that, and Judge Rinder from who did his first pantomime last year, which is great. I wonder how that went. So there's Best Newcomer, but there's obviously categories for Best Panto under 600 seats, between certain 600 and 1,000, I think, and then over 1,000. So lots of categories for group awards, like the whole theatre, the whole production, and then individual awards for things like Best Mythical Being, which obviously includes a lot of fairies and sprites, and as well as a few baddies as well, I'm sure. So, and Best Comic, of course.
Yes, so many different categories, and Panto Dames finally getting the recognition that they deserve. How are the awards judged? Because someone's got to go and see a lot of pantomimes at Christmas.
Oh, Alicia, you're so right. I mean, it's almost an impossible task because, of course, there are hundreds of pantos going on. And the way it works, I'm not actually involved in the judging because I do a panto myself down in Poole. And the way it works is that there are many judges that go out, and rather like with GCSEs and degree examinations, they have a certain list of criteria that they're looking for and they're scoring, and then they get together. There's a proper judges conference. Once again, I wasn't a part of any of that, but I have seen the process and the procedure that they go through, so it seems to be quite clear how it all goes together. And I think, yes, what would have been an impossible job has been tackled very well by some very clever people, and we're very lucky that they've done it. But they're rewarding not just excellence, but also progress as well, you know, in shows that have been more inclusive, more diverse, just tackling different things. Obviously, we're not doing EastEnders, you know, so we're not, you know, tackling major issues. But what we are trying to do is to make them relevant for all the areas that they're in, and saying, you know, well done for doing whatever you did. So yeah, very exciting, and we've got people coming from all over the country, not just London, to see if they've won or not.
Yes, such a range of different pantomimes being recognised this evening. For yourself and other people involved, many faces that we see get involved in the world of pantomime and just keep coming back every year. What is it about panto, do you think, that pulls people back to the tradition?
I think it's a bug, and you're right, it is a tradition, and it's part of people's tradition. I mean, I talk to a lot of people who say, because I did 8 shows, 8 pantos in Bournemouth, one after another, and when I stopped, and I had to for family reasons, I'd ruined Christmas, you know, for one family. I mean, a bit over the top, but because I was part of their tradition, which is a great honour to be part of people's lives, and it's a tradition to be in it, you know, every year. And obviously there are traditions with it. Well, we call them traditions; they're just things that we do every year, same jokes, whatever. But there are elements of panto that are familiar every year. There are jokes. There are people that pop back. I mean, the Palladium now seems to have Julian Clary and Nigel Havers, a wonderful recurring cast who have taken over that venue, and people look forward to them being there and perhaps doing familiar things every year. So it becomes part of people's Christmas, which is wonderful, and that's happening all over the country, which is marvellous.
Pantomime obviously is all about fun, something we see every year at Christmas time, but the last 2 years has been particularly difficult for the industry. Of course, we would remember that from 2020, but as well last year with the variant that took down a lot of pantomimes. How badly has the panto industry been affected, and how important is it for an association like yourselves to be getting behind pantos?
Personally, I was very lucky in that we have managed to do pantos over the last 2 years. We did a very short one in 2020, and then a full one this season just gone, but still very difficult. And I think, I'm not sure about the finances. Obviously, I think it's affected the performers, and probably the younger performers the most, because they had nothing to start with and they've just been out of work and perhaps didn't have anything else other than, you know, working at Starbucks or Amazon to fill in the time. So I actually think it's affected them probably more than the producers and the theatres, who may have been given grants. But in terms of actually putting on the panto, it's been very difficult because, as you know, working in media, it's very it's the same in a theatre. It's all about people skills and bonding and creating a vibe as well in the rehearsal room. And having to wear masks wasn't very good. And, you know, the audience sitting there, it's a bit difficult, really, for them to join in something that is intrinsically interactive. You know, you kind of want people to be able to shout out and enjoy themselves. But it's great that things seem to be getting back to normal, and as we live with the virus, you know, hopefully this year will be a romp.
Yes, absolutely. Lots of people heading back to theatre. You're backstage there now at the theatre. How are preparations going?
Well, I have to say, you know, we're in safe hands with Wiggins. So Wiggins is our host. He's also the president of the UK Pantomime Association, which has big ambitions to do a PantoCon and all sorts of things. But I've just been working with an ensemble of characters. Okay, so these guys, 4 ensemble members who this year had to fill in different theatres, so they were swing performers. So as soon as somebody went off with COVID, get to Leamington Spa now, you're on as Prince, looking at the lines in the wings and then going on and doing their very best. So we've written a version of Holding Out for a Hero to honour all those people who during COVID had to go on at the last minute, you know, with their lines written on their arms and on phones and on the back of the set or whatever. So they were real heroes. So we've just been doing that. I've got to go back because literally it's not long before we start, and make sure that they're happy, but they're brilliant. And obviously this is just a 2-minute song. They were doing 2 hours at very late notice last Christmas, so I'm sure they'll be absolutely fine and the audience will enjoy it.
There we are, Chris Jarvis there, and the awards get started at 7:30 this evening at the Trafalgar Theatre. Best of luck to all involved. Right, it's time for a break now, but still to come. East London's Brick Lane is about to become the capital's jazz quarter as a 3-day festival dedicated to all forms of the genre moves in.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Hello there, welcome back to the final part of London Live News at 6. Now, a charity auction raising funds for the Ukrainian Humanitarian Relief Fund is coming to the capital this weekend. Organised by Londoner Katie Evans, who is half Ukrainian with family in Lviv, wants to use this auction to raise awareness but also much needed funds for those in desperate need.
My mother's family are Ukrainian, so with the awful events happening over there, I have set up a charity auction which is happening on the 23rd of April at Primrose Hill Community Centre to raise awareness for the humanitarian efforts that are happening over there, but also to raise money for the Ukrainian emergency appeal. So they're providing support, healthcare, they're providing really much needed aid for the people who have been hit the hardest by the war in Ukraine.
Do you still have family in Ukraine at the moment?
I do, yes. So my family are in, they're about 50 miles outside of Lviv. They're in a little village, but they, some of my cousins work in Lviv. So they're on the western side, which is regarded as kind of the safer area at the minute. But my cousins and uncles, they've been fighting in the military, so they're either in the military or in the reserves. So yeah, it's a scary time. My family don't want to come back to the UK, or they don't want to come to the UK because it's their home. Ukraine is their home. So, you know, it's a scary time. We want them to come over, but you know, we ultimately it's down to them.
And have you had contact with your family that are actually fighting? You said your uncles and your cousins were.
Yeah, so I'm getting regular kind of WhatsApp pings from my cousins and my uncles. It's harrowing. The pictures and the videos that they're sending over is harrowing. So yeah, I check in with them every day to make sure that they're safe. That, you know, if there's anything that they need. But yeah, it seems surreal. We used to go over to the Ukraine and, you know, have big family dinners together and big walks. And, you know, now I'm getting updates from them from the front lines. It's really scary.
Gosh, yeah, that must be really, really hard. So looking ahead to this auction now, going ahead in April, what are you going to be putting up for auction? What are you asking people to, you know, donate?
So the auction's going really well. I've got some really, really great prizes. Still working on getting some more and more as well. I've been focused more on kind of experiences as opposed to material prizes, simply because it seems a bit more to match the tone. You know, we're all about family We want to make sure our family members are safe. So the prizes that have been donated are like meals out, vouchers for restaurants, a hotel stay in central London. My people at work, my managers have been absolutely amazing with helping me pull together some of the prizes. So yeah, it's going to be a really nice evening.
What would your pledge be to people thinking about coming to the auction? What would you say to them to try and get them down on the day?
So we've got these massive events happening in London, these big, rallies, big, big massive events. But I want to do something for the community in Camden. And so, for people who are wanting to come down, I would say, it's going to be a really lovely night. It's going to be, it's not going to be doom and gloom. It's about raising money and, having that community feel, hence why I'm doing it at Primrose Hill Community Centre. So Primrose Hill Community Centre, it is at the heart of the community. And, I want to make the evening a place where people from Camden and from the area can come and enjoy themselves, can talk about what's happening over in Ukraine, but can also, help raise money for the humanitarian relief that's happening.
There we are. That auction will be going ahead at the Primrose Hill Community Centre on Saturday from 7 to 9 p.m. Now, a new 3-day event is coming to East London this month. The Brick Lane Jazz Festival will bring together jazz, electronic, Afro and Latino musicians performing across 5 venues at the Truman Brewery. Trailblazers like Blue Lab Beats and Wheel Up will be there alongside upcoming talent making waves in the industry. Tanya has been speaking to one of the organisers about what we can expect.
I've been programming live music at the Truman Brewery for about 6 years now, and we opened a jazz club a few years ago, and I just discovered this incredible community, as well as this sort of cultural movement that the jazz scene is. Incredible music, incredible talent, but also this kind of really diverse, rich community. And I knew it was just something really special that a lot of people don't know about. And I think when people think of jazz, they think of this very traditional kind of old-fashioned kind of like a boom, boom, and it's not. It's just kind of really moved away from that. And there's just such diversity in the genres and in the musicians. It's a really diverse lineup that we've got this year. And I just really wanted to kind of like show that to the rest of the world and bring it up to East London as well.
Tell us more about the lineup, because you mentioned there that it's quite diverse. It is a bit of a jazz discovery, even for people who know jazz, because you're bringing loads of different artists together. But it's not just that genre of music. There are other genres that people could come down and see as well.
It's called the Jazz Festival, and we've got a very small amount of that kind of traditional old, not even old jazz. It's still all very contemporary. But there's loads of Afrobeat, there's broken beats, there's soul, future soul, neo soul, there's world music. So it's just loads of genres, and we've also got a big strong DJ contingent as well. So there'll be a lot of dancing going down. It's such a busy part of the world, that part of East London, especially on a Saturday and a Sunday, with flower markets and Brick Lane Market and all the sort of food stalls. But this is a ticketed event. So how does it work? Because there are quite a few stages for people to go around. So we've got 5 stages, 5 venues. And so it's a bit like the London Jazz Festival. If anyone's been to that, you buy individual tickets for all shows. But we've priced them really reasonably. So concessions start at like £5 for a concession ticket. And they go up to, I think the most expensive ticket is £15. And what was it like bringing and having to choose who to put on stage? I think after the pandemic, the music scene seems to be thriving again, and so many people are, artists just want to get back on stage and just want to be performing live again. Were you inundated with people saying, "Please let me perform"? I'm still getting daily bucket loads of requests of people saying, "Is there any more space on the lineup?" It was amazingly well received, and it took me a long time to select this group, because it's only 3 days, there's only 5 stages, there's only so much you can program. And it was really difficult actually in the end. But yeah, I'm super proud of the lineup that we've got this year. It's going to be great. I think jazz is becoming way more mainstream. I mean, you've got people like Poppy Ajuda, Theon Cross, Ezra Collective. You know, these guys are really bringing it to the mainstream. And East London is obviously like a huge hub for all kind of like cutting edge cultural movements. But also South East London actually, and South London in general. There's lots of different jazz scenes going on there. So it was also a really nice opportunity to bring all of those different scenes around London together into one location. We've got like a West London broken beat artist playing at the Truman Brewery, so wheel up, so that'll be fun.
Well, the Brick Lane Jazz Fest is on from the 22nd until the 24th of April at the Truman Brewery in East London. Right, let's take a final check at the weather now. Some cloud this evening, but it should be dry. Overnight lows of around 8 or 9 degrees. Wednesday looks like a fine and bright day. Some sunny spells and highs of 17 Celsius. It's a similar outlook for Thursday and Friday at this stage. And that's all from us this evening. More on our social channels throughout the day. Follow us at London Live for updates, and we'll be back tomorrow at 6 o'clock. But from all of us here, have a lovely evening.